Hi everyone, this is Paige. We are going to do a walkthrough now of using Google Colab and how to get that started if you've never used it before. So here is the school website. This is the 2020 school website here. You have all these really nice links. We'll go to Python programming, go down here, and more stuff will be added here soon, but for now, we're going to start by trying to use Google Drive, which hopefully you have an account on Google. You will need one to use Google Colab, but it is free with a Google account. So what we are going to do is copy this link, and I'm going to go into a new tab. Okay, that did not work. Open link in new tab. There we go. So we're going to do that. And this takes me to a Google Drive folder. So it's created a Google Drive folder that says shared with me. And it has these two folders in it. This, in the next day and actually throughout the week, more folders will be added because there will be quite a few labs that are using Python. But for now, I wanted to get this tutorial out. So we just have a couple here. And so if I double click on Python tutorials, we can see that there are two things here. There's an introductory Colab walkthrough. There's also an introductory Jupyter walkthrough. I'm going to do this so we can actually see the files. So the Jupyter walkthrough is one if you're just using Jupyter Notebook on your local computer. So if you're using Colab, just forget about that one. And we want to use this one. So let's see if this works. So if I double click this, it says no preview available. That's because we haven't started Google Colab on this account yet. So I'm going to open a new tab and search for Google Colab and click here. So you want this one, colab.research.google.com. And here I am. It's starting a Colab session for me on my Google Drive. And you can see that it has this welcome to Colab. So we can also write new notebook, but let's go ahead and click this. Welcome to Colab. It has all of this information about Colab and how to use it, examples from data science, machine learning, and it's all of these really nice resources here. I do recommend going through some of them. A lot of them are not directly necessary for this school, but you can certainly learn a lot, especially these ones here of using Markdown, how to import libraries, saving and loading notebooks. These are all really, really good. And I do have to admit that I'm relatively new to Google Colab as well, so you may find out a lot cooler functionality than I've found. And if you do, feel free to share on the Slack channel. So so this is great. Now we've started a Colab session. If we go here, we can say Open Notebook. You can go to a bunch of examples. These are some of the ones that we were just looking at. You can look at Markdown Guide, and it'll open up this guide that you can go through, and it kind of takes you through a tutorial on how to open it. But we wanted to add this very specific one. So now that we've opened it on our drive, let's see if this works. So if I double click this, open with, no, it doesn't seem to have it. Let's see if I refresh the page, if it will help. All right, double click it. Still doesn't have Google Colab. Well, let's see if we can connect it. Colab. There we go. Now I can click Colab, install. Installing it in, I'm actually on the COESSING account right now because I've done this already on my account. Great. So now I've installed it. So now when I double click, now it says no preview available, but I can say connected apps, Google Colab, or you can just click up here. And now it will open that notebook in Google Colab. Takes a second here. Hooray. So now notice that it says copy to drive here. If you see this, it means that it is not currently in your drive. And so all we're doing is using a copy. So I definitely recommend for anything that you're doing when you're trying to copy it over, click copy to drive. It'll open up a new thing in a new window. Here we go, or a new tab. And now this is your own version of the notebook that is automatically saved in your Google Drive. So let's go and take a look at that. So if you go to My Drive, you can see that there are Colab notebooks here. If I double click, you can now see that I have a copy of this introductory. So notice I put copy of in front because we made a copy. We can rename that. If we go here, click up here, we can just delete that. Done. And so here's where you would find all of your notebooks from your Google Colab. Great. So now we have it open in our own drive. And if you forget to do that, if you forget to open it in your own drive, you'll find if you try to save it, it works. Before, if I tried to save it, it would come up with a message that says, you didn't write this notebook, you don't have permission to do these things. And so that's fine. Just add it to your drive. Great. So let's go through a walkthrough here. So you'll notice that I can click these different cells. So this is very much like a Jupyter notebook if you've used that. And these are each just kind of individual cells, as we call them. And they can be used to evaluate code, or in this case, it's mostly text at the moment. If we pull this, you can have a little table of contents. That's kind of nice. You can toggle these. These are based on headers. So that kind of helps keep things organized. You also, if you click on this folder here, you can see, so it's connecting over here. See, it says connecting. This is basically the same as a kernel in Jupyter Notebook. And so this is initializing the actual code, initializing what will actually be running the code when you run this notebook. And so now you see it's running. It says connected, so you're good to go. And so here you have some sample data that already comes with Colab. I haven't actually looked into too many of these, but on some of the tutorials it probably uses that. I'll show a few more functionality over here, but let's go through this tutorial first. All right, so as I said, we have these different cells. If I double click, you can see that this is now in this kind of editing format, and I can add more text. And now if I either just click out of it, now you can see that more text was added. You can also do Shift-Enter. So this does look a little different than the Jupyter Notebook. It comes up with these nice things where I can say, oh, but I want more text to be in bold. And it automatically does this double star, which makes it bold in Jupyter Notebook as well. And I can do Shift-Enter. Now that one's bold. And you'll see here that you can actually see a preview of what it looks like. So here it shows the stars because that's how you make it bold in this text field. If I make it italicized, you can see now that it's italicized here. So you can see exactly what it looks like before evaluating it. Okay, so now let's create our own cell. So we can go up here and say plus code, that gives us a coding cell, or text, add a text cell, and that adds a text cell here. Now we can say, yay, text cell added. And now we can see that this text cell was added. We can use these over here. If you just kind of hover over them, they come up here. You can see move cell down. So we can move the cells up and down. You can do all sorts of things. You can link to this cell. You can comment on this. So this is kind of like a Google Doc. I actually haven't used this too much, but there's some really cool functionality here. You can also just delete the cell here. Great. So now you've seen how you can make them bold and italicized. Let's make them bigger. So if I double click here, you can see if I just do hashtag, then I get this, which is actually the largest header. Then here, 2 hashtags, make sure there's a space between there. And you can know, so if I don't put a space, oh, maybe it's really smart in Colab. In Jupyter Notebook, haha, it is smart. In Jupyter Notebook, if you don't have the space, it will just print out a normal text. Anyway, Colab is a little smarter than that. Great. So, yep, and a smaller header, you can do 3 hashtags. You can do 4 and 5, and it starts getting smaller and italicized and bolded and all that stuff. You can play around with that. So there are a few other things. I mentioned this moving cells up and down. Actually, if you see, if I just kind of hover right below this, I don't have to even go up to the top here where the plus code and plus text are. I can just do, I just want to add another text field here. And then I can say, whoops, didn't mean to do that. and delete it. You can switch. So if you're in a text field, so let's say you're in this field and you're like, oh, but I wanted to make this a coding field. You can type Control MY. So if I do Control MY, now you see this looks very different, and this is a coding cell. But then this is not supposed to be a coding cell because it's just text. So I'm going to do Command MM, and it goes back to a markdown or a text cell. So yeah, hot tip, hover over things. They tell you what they do. It's pretty nice, very self-explanatory. Now let's do some Python coding. So without adding any libraries or anything, we can just do some basic math. You can square numbers, all sorts of things. You can print text. So notice we have to say print here because we're not in a text cell, we're in a coding cell. You can print text here where you say the variable has a value and then print the actual value of the variable. Lots of options, but the more interesting stuff is when we use these libraries. So let's import this numerical library called NumPy. So we say import NumPy, that imports the library so we're able to use it. As NP means that we can use the nickname NP to to use it, which we'll see here. So instead of writing NumPy each time, I can say NP dot. That means access the NumPy library and use the sign function in this case. And there's also np.py. So you'll see when I hover over it, it has some useful things. It says this is the float, which is like a decimal number called pi. If I hover over a sign, it should also do that. There we go. So this actually tells you everything about the sign function. So it says sign, you put your input here. You can have all of these other optional things, which I haven't done. It tells you what this is. X should be an array. It will give you an array. This is kind of the output. And it has all of these things, notes, examples, like super nice. So that's a very handy part of Google Colab. Okay, so shift enter that, and we get this value. Lovely. NumPy is also great for making arrays. So if I print this, we print this array that is defined to be 1, 3, 6, and 11, which is basically, it's just like a series of numbers. And we can see that there's this array here. That's A. And B, using this np.aRange, is saying print out all numbers starting from 0 and print out 10 of them. So that prints out 0 to 9 in an array here. So this is to note that it doesn't print 1 through 10, even though you said 10 here. It starts at 0. Indexing in Python starts at 0. This does come up quite often, and it is different from MATLAB if that's something you're used to. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're doing some cool plotting. So Matplotlib is a nice plotting package. And actually it says, note, we don't need to include this first line. We can just delete it, or we can actually comment it by putting a hashtag in front. And now you can see it's green, so it's commented out. So this line in Jupyter Notebook is needed so that we can see the plots kind of in line, so within the notebook. Colab has that configured by default, so we don't need this line. But if you have it, it doesn't matter, so there's no harm. All right, so we're going to import this matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. Now let's make a little plot. Notice we use the NumPy package here to create some arrays that we then plot. But it's always good to label. So here we have some labels on our plot. So notice we have this title. We have the X and Y axes labeled very boringly as X and Y. That is nice to usually do something a little bit more than that, but that's fine for now. And we've also changed the color. So here this says R, so that's for red. We've changed the line style to dashed, whereas up here was just a straight line. And so you can look up more things like this to customize your plots if you want. There are lots of different options. All right, so another useful library is Pandas. And Pandas is used to manipulate data that usually it's like 2D data or 1D data, so you don't have, it's not as good for 3D, and it keeps data in columns. So this is really nice if you have data, so you have, dates and you've taken precipitation data at each date. Then you have two columns. One is date, one is the value of the precipitation at that date. And you can then combine these into the same Pandas data frame, as it's called here. So we're going to import Pandas as PD. Then we're going to create this data frame, which I've just said df. And often you would be loading in data. Here I'm just going to create it because we're not going to load in any data yet. And here I'm creating columns. So I'm saying column A should be equal to 1. Column B should be this timestamp. So you can actually have a format. Instead of a number, it can be an actual like date time. That's what we call it. This is a series of numbers. You have an NumPy array. These are basically just like text. And let's see, if we do df, it'll print out what the data frame looks like. So if I do shift enter, then I get what this looks like. I should also point out that you can do shift enter, or you can click this arrow here. And actually it says you can also do command or control enter. Huh. What do you know? But anyway, you can click this arrow here and run the cell as well if you don't want to do shift enter each time. Also, if you go here, you can get rid of the output if you don't want to see that anymore. So anyway, I'll run that again. Now you can see this is really nicely laid out. We have these 4 different rows. We have 6 different columns. And you can see that they're very different. They're in very different formats, which is really nice because often with data you have very different formats. To see the different types, you can use the df. So df is the data that we defined up above. And dtypes tells you what type it is. So you have floats, that's like decimal numbers. We have a date time. You have more floats, integers, this category and objects. You have all sorts of different things, which we won't go into exactly what the different types are. That you can look up, but just know that you can use different types here. If you want to isolate a column, then you can just call it. You just say df of, and you can say, in this case, I said column E, shift enter, and now it prints out column E. So it was column E here, test train, test train. Yep, that's what we see here. And it tells you what type it is. So this is just barely scratching the surface of the Pandas library, but you will be using this in at least one other lab, probably a couple this week. So you'll hopefully get some more experience working with Pandas. It's a really great library and very useful. So there are a few more libraries that I wanted to go through. Cartopy is one of them. This plots maps, and as climate-related scientists, that is really nice for us. It's a really useful tool, so it just makes our plotting look really nice. NetCDF4 is one package that you can use to load in NetCDF data, which comes as .nc files. We probably won't use this year, I'm not sure, but it has been used in last year, so you can see some examples there. And Xarray is another alternative where you can load .cdf data, and actually is optimized for kind of large volumes of data. So if you have lots of data, Xarray handles that really well, where it loads in parts of the data that are needed, but doesn't load in other parts that aren't needed. It's pretty nifty. And you can do some things pretty quickly, like in one line. You can take an average and plot data in one line. So that's pretty cool. Okay, before we do this, let's mount to the Google Drive. So notice that, at the beginning I was saying, so our Colab, we have our Colab notebook here, and this is our notebook that we've been going through. I'm going to close this one. So remember, this one looks very similar, but it has the copy to drive, which means it's not the one in our drive. So I'll just go ahead and close it. I'll go ahead and save this for now. So one thing that's really nice is that you can actually have access to your Google Drive to access data, which we will do for some of these labs. So if I mount the drive, that meaning I click here, so it has a little drive symbol in this folder, and look what happened. It says, run this cell to mount your Google Drive. Say dismiss. And it just pastes this in. I don't even have to type it. I can run this, and you'll see what happens. It comes up with this, and it says, go to this URL in a browser. So I click this. It opens this in a new tab. I say, yep, I want to go to the COESSING school. And then I say, allow. And now it says, please copy this code. So you copy this, this code, kind of. And then you go back here, you click in this box, you paste it, and hit enter. And now you can see it's working, so it's going, and there it's done. And it says mounted. So now my Google Drive is mounted, which means now I have access to all the folders in my Google Drive. So this will be very helpful. Sometimes it'll show up here in a second. It sometimes takes a little time to sync. So this is how you're welcome to either download everything from the website or from Slack, download all the data, which is usually pretty small, and then you can just upload it here into Colab, or you can try and use the shared link from Google Drive. All right, so we'll let that sit for a second. If you did download, so let's say you went back here and you said, oh, I'm going to download this. So I click there, it starts this download. From here, I can do file and I can upload notebook. If I click that, then I can choose the file or I can drag the file in. Remember you have to unzip it first. So that's really nice. You can just do it that way. That's nice and easy if you didn't want to go directly through Google Drive like we did here. And look, now the drive is mounted. And if I click this arrow, we can see my drive. And these are all of the notebooks. All the folders. And so now we see we have these Colab notebooks. So that's great. But remember when we went here, let's see, shared with me, we had this COESSING 2020 folder. Like, let's say you want to do the Tides Lab. This, you need to do a little bit of a, create a shortcut here. So go back, go to the shared with me, go to this folder, right click, and go to this add shortcut to drive. If you click there, then it'll take you here. And you want to put it in your drive. So click there, in my drive, and then just say add shortcut. You don't have to select a folder here. So now when I add shortcut, it says shortcut added. Great. Now when I go to my drive, notice that there's this new folder, COESSING 2020 Python Labs, and see how it has this little arrow? That means that it's a shortcut from the shared with me area. But when I click on it, it all looks fine. It has everything in it. So sometimes it takes quite a while to sync up here. We're going to go ahead and try and refresh the drive. Give it a second, and now let's try it again. So if I go to my drive, there we go. We have the folder, COESSING 2020. You have the Python labs, you have the Tides labs, and these here are, this is data. So let's go ahead and actually import that data. So I'll add a new code here. Let's use pandas. So use pandas to load some example tide data. So you'll be doing this in the Tide lab, but I want to take you through these steps. So you say data equals pd dot read underscore CSV. And notice how it pops up with these things. You click that. And now it says file path or buffer. So it tells you what you need. And so the file path, if you notice when I highlight this, there are these 3 dots over on the right-hand side. So if I click on that, I can say copy path. Then you can just paste it over here. Oops, we probably should have put that in quotes. And I believe that I need to put a sep equals, and this is just because I've gone through this lab already. Let's see if that works. And data.ed. So now it's working, and great. Now you can see that we've just loaded some data. Notice the .head here. If I just type data, so I've just commented out the head part, that works as well, but then it prints out a bunch of rows, and it says, well, it gives you just a sample, which is fine. It gives you the number of rows. But .head is kind of nice. It just gives you the top 5 rows, so you can just get a sample of what it looks like. Equivalently, you can do .tail, And it gives you the last 5 rows of the data. And that's just if you want to get a look at it. So that's how you link to data within your drive. And yeah, so a few tips. Don't be shy to play around with any of this stuff. Google Colab has a lot of really interesting stuff going on, way more than I have had time to look at. So explore. One nice thing here is this code snippet. If you watched the video on the website and on the Slack channel, you can see that you can type in things and you can get visualizations like bar, oh, there we go, bar plot. So yeah, play around with all this stuff. Don't feel bad about, breaking things. That's how you learn. And if you completely mess up this whole document and you've saved it and you're like, oh shoot, I can't get back, that's fine. Go back to the website, go back to your Google Drive, just download it all again. It'll all be there. Great, so if you do get error messages, which happens a lot, that's great. They're often super helpful. I have to say, in my experience, usually the error messages I get are just typos. So let's see if I type, instead of, I'm trying to say print and I say pring this. And then if I run that, I'm going to get says name pring is not defined. I'll say, whoa, well, that's obvious because that's not a thing. What I meant was print. Then you're all good to go. So error messages actually are super helpful. It's not like you have to go through and try and read everything. Sometimes you do, but often it tells you exactly what's wrong, which is really nice. You can also Google error messages. It's a great way. A lot of people get error messages and they'll have Googled it and someone will have answered their questions. Yeah. So if you have any questions related to Python or Colab during this week, feel free to put them. In fact, I encourage you to put them on the Slack channel Python Help here. Hopefully you're on Slack. This channel will be monitored. I'll be monitoring it in the morning in Ghanaian time. That's just because of the Australian time difference. But there'll be others who are happy to help at other times of day as well. And if you have an answer, like if maybe you made the same mistake before and someone asks about it, don't wait for me to answer or any of the other instructors. Like, go for it. This is a community. You might be better just suited to answer a lot of these than I am. And you can say, oh, I see what your problem is. You spelled pring, and you can help someone out. So that'd be great. I'd love to get a real nice discussion going on Slack. Yeah, I think that is it for now. A few nice things here. So you can see that in a new notebook, all these things. Save a copy in Drive. If you used GitHub, we're not really going to use GitHub, but you can integrate that into Colab quite well. Here, it's really nice. You can download a .ipynb, so like IPython notebook. It's the same as a Jupyter Notebook file. So you can download this and then open it in Jupyter Notebook and vice versa. So they work really well together. Or you can just do it as a straight Python file. Okay, if you need to restart the runtime here, you can say manage sessions. This doesn't happen too often. You can say terminate, and it'll restart the session for you. Yeah, I don't think there are too many more things to say. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you do several more of the Python labs, and you'll get a lot more used to a lot of these packages. Thank you all so much.